For the final step of the Swiss repeat, you will need a variety of gouache paints, a fine paintbrush, a larger round paintbrush, a paper palette for mixing paints, a palette knife, a jar or cup for fresh water, paper towels, frisket, a sharp X-Acto knife, a burnishing tool, and a variety of tools to create texture and add detail, like a sponge, an old toothbrush, and colored pencils. You will also need a plastic sheet or newspaper, a metal ruler, and a cutting mat. Cover the workspace with the plastic sheet or newspaper and mix the gouache with a little water until it is creamy, about the consistency of egg yolk. With the fine paintbrush, outline each shape, painting just outside of the lines. You might want to use a sheet of paper under your hand to avoid smudging the pencil lines. Fill in the shape outlines, painting the area as evenly and flat as possible. This will be easier if the color has been tinted with white. If you used more than one color, make sure that each fragment along the outside edges is painted the same color. Allow to dry thoroughly. Once the paint is dry, you can add detail by drawing over the shapes with colored pencils. Don't worry about staying within the lines. Everything that falls outside the shapes will be painted over. Carefully lay a sheet of frisket over the entire block. Pulling away the backing and smoothing out air bubbles as you go. Run the burnishing tool around the outside edges of the shapes. Using a sharp X-Acto knife, cut the frisket just inside the painted edge of each shape, being careful not to cut through the paper as well. Once all of the shapes have been cut, carefully peel the frisket away from the background, leaving the frisket over the shapes. Recut as necessary. Run the burnishing tool around the edges of each shape again to ensure a tight seal. Go back to your paper palette and mix enough paint to complete the entire background. Again, for a flatter and more even and opaque surface, you can tint the color with white. Paint the areas around the shapes, over the edges of the frisket, and just outside the square, but do not paint over the registration marks at the corners. Allow to dry. You can add texture to the background by dabbing on a contrasting color with a sponge. The more texture there is, the easier it will be to repair the seams of the block later on. You can also spatter paint over the background using an old toothbrush. Flick the paint off the brush with a palette knife. Allow the paint to dry thoroughly before proceeding to the next step. Peel off the remaining frisket using the tip of the X-Acto knife to lift the edges. Touch up the paint if necessary, and if flecks of the background paint adhere to the shapes, gently remove them with masking tape. Place a cutting mat under the paper and cut out the 14-inch square using an X-Acto knife and lining up the metal ruler with the lines that extend past the corners of the blocks. The block is now complete. Once it is scanned, the seams can be repaired digitally.